Tonight, we pull back the curtain on a scandal that has festered in the shadows for far too long. This isn't just about negligence, it's about a deliberate, calculated cover-up by those sworn to protect us. We're talking about a systemic failure, a betrayal of public trust that reaches into the highest echelons of power. The evidence we've uncovered paints a chilling picture of complicity and evasion. We will expose the architects of this deception, revealing how they manipulated systems and silenced dissent. This investigation will leave no stone unturned, no question unanswered. We demand accountability, and tonight, we begin to get it. This is the story they didn't want you to hear, and it's time for the truth to emerge. We're here to confront the uncomfortable truth, to lay bare the mechanisms of deceit that have allowed this injustice to persist. This isn't some abstract policy debate, it's a stark examination of how power, unchecked and unburdened by ethics, can corrupt absolutely. We will dissect the intricate web of connections, the backroom deals, and the deliberate obfuscations that have shielded the guilty. Our focus is sharp, our resolve unyielding. We will present irrefutable evidence, not conjecture, but hard facts that demand a reckoning. This is about exposing the rot at the core of our institutions, and demanding that those responsible face the consequences. We've seen the cover-ups, and now, we will see the truth. Last time, we laid the groundwork, revealing the initial cracks in their carefully constructed facade. We touched upon the early warning signs, the ignored pleas, and the first whispers of a conspiracy. Remember the Wyden report? It wasn't just a document, it was a flashing red light, a desperate attempt to sound the alarm that was deliberately ignored. We saw how the Department of Justice, rather than upholding its mandate, became an unwitting accomplice through its redaction failures, effectively burying crucial evidence. These weren't isolated incidents, they were the first tremors of a much larger earthquake, a deliberate pattern of suppression. Tonight, we delve deeper, moving beyond the initial revelations to uncover the true scale of this betrayal. Now, we turn our attention to the very heart of this operation, the financial engine that fueled this deception. This isn't just about money, it's about the insidious influence of wealth, how it can warp judgment and compromise integrity. We're talking about a system designed to enrich a select few, at the expense of countless others. The emails we've uncovered are damning, revealing a callous disregard for human cost in pursuit of profit. They expose a culture where ethical considerations were not just secondary, but entirely absent. This financial engine wasn't just generating revenue, it was generating a moral vacuum, where accountability was a foreign concept. This is where the true corruption lies, in the cold, calculated pursuit of gain, no matter the human toll. And it leads us directly to the next critical question. This brings us to the billion-dollar question, the one that cuts to the very core of this scandal: who truly benefited, and at what cost? This isn't some abstract economic theory, it's about real people, real lives, and the devastating impact of unchecked greed. We've seen the mechanisms, the financial engine, and now we must identify the beneficiaries. The evidence points to a select group, individuals who profited immensely while others suffered in silence. This isn't just about financial gain, it's about the erosion of trust, the undermining of justice, and the profound damage inflicted upon our society. We must demand answers, and we must hold those who profited accountable for their actions. The truth, however uncomfortable, must finally come to light. We've asked the billion-dollar question, and now we must confront the uncomfortable truth: this wasn't an accident. This was a system, meticulously constructed, and it had its enablers. These are the entities, the individuals, and the policies that allowed this financial predation to flourish unchecked. They created the environment where billions could be siphoned from the vulnerable. We're talking about a deliberate failure of oversight, a calculated turning of a blind eye by those who should have protected the public. This isn't just about negligence, it's about complicity. And it's a complicity that reaches into the highest echelons of power. The evidence we've uncovered points to a network of institutions that actively facilitated this exploitation. They profited from it, directly or indirectly. And they continue to do so. Now, let's look at one of the most damning pieces of evidence, a smoking gun that exposes this systemic failure. And here it is, smoking gun number 10, the SARS, or Suspicious Activity Reports. These aren't just bureaucratic filings, they are urgent alarms, screamed into the void by financial institutions themselves, flagging potential criminal activity. But what happens when those alarms are ignored, or worse, deliberately suppressed? The Wyden report reveals a shocking truth. A staggering 99.9% of these SARS, these critical warnings, were never acted upon by the Department of Justice. Think about that for a moment. Nearly every single red flag, every indication of illicit financial dealings, was left to gather dust. This isn't just incompetence, it's a deliberate abdication of responsibility. It allowed the predators to continue their schemes, emboldened by the silence from law enforcement. The DOJ's failure to act on these SARS is a direct pipeline to the billions lost. It's a clear indication that the system was rigged against accountability. This inaction created a massive discrepancy, a chasm between what was reported and what was investigated. This brings us to the 300-fold discrepancy, a number so egregious it demands immediate scrutiny. We're talking about a gap between the number of SARS filed and the number of actual prosecutions that is simply unconscionable. For every 300 suspicious activity reports, only one, a single one, resulted in a prosecution. This isn't just a statistical anomaly, it's a flashing neon sign pointing to a profound systemic breakdown. It means that for every instance of justice, 299 others were allowed to slip through the cracks, their perpetrators unpunished, their victims unavenged. This discrepancy isn't accidental, it's a direct consequence of the DOJ's inaction, their deliberate choice to ignore the warnings. It allowed a wall of cash to accumulate, fueling further illicit activities. This is the true cost of their negligence, measured in billions of dollars and countless shattered lives. And this wall of cash, what exactly is it? So, what exactly is this wall of cash we keep referring to? It's the accumulated, illicit gains, the billions of dollars that were allowed to flow freely, unhindered by the very institutions designed to stop them. This isn't just theoretical money, it's tangible wealth, built on the backs of the vulnerable, laundered through our financial system. The DOJ's failure to act on those SARS directly contributed to the growth of this wall. It's the direct result of their negligence, their complicity in allowing these funds to proliferate. This wall represents the unchecked power of financial criminals, operating with impunity, knowing that their illicit activities will likely go unpunished. It's a testament to the broken system, a monument to the failures of oversight. And this wall of cash isn't just sitting idle, it's actively generating more wealth, driven by a powerful incentive. This brings us to the heart of the matter, the fee incentive. The fee incentive. This is where the conspiracy truly solidifies, where the motive becomes undeniably clear. It's the insidious mechanism that fueled this entire predatory system. Every transaction, every illicit transfer, every fraudulent scheme generated fees. And those fees, no matter how small individually, accumulated into a colossal sum, enriching the very institutions that should have been stopping the crime. This isn't just about a few bad apples, it's about a systemic incentive to allow, and even encourage, the flow of illicit funds. The more money that moved, the more fees were collected, creating a perverse profit motive for inaction. This is why the SARS were ignored, why the prosecutions were so few. The system was designed to profit from the very activities it was supposed to prevent. It's a betrayal of public trust, a cynical exploitation of the vulnerable for financial gain. And this exploitation, this deliberate turning of a blind eye, reaches to the very top, involving individuals like Mary Erdoes. The fee incentive, as we've just seen, fueled a dangerous pursuit of profit. But it wasn't just about the money, it was about access, about influence at the highest levels. This brings us to Mary Erdoes, a key figure at JP Morgan, whose direct involvement with Epstein is deeply troubling. The Wyden report lays bare the extent of this executive contact, revealing a pattern of personal engagement that went far beyond professional necessity. We're talking about direct emails, personal meetings, and a level of familiarity that raises serious questions about judgment and complicity. This wasn't a peripheral relationship, it was central to how Epstein operated, leveraging his connections to maintain his financial lifelines. And it's this kind of executive-level engagement that allowed Epstein to navigate the financial system with such alarming ease, setting the stage for the compliance bypass we'll examine next. The direct executive contact we just discussed, particularly with figures like Mary Erdoes, wasn't just about maintaining a client relationship, it was about actively circumventing the very safeguards designed to prevent illicit activity. This is the compliance bypass, a deliberate subversion of banking protocols that allowed Epstein's dark money to flow unchecked. The DOJ's redaction failures, highlighted in the Wyden report, are not mere oversights, they are evidence of a systemic breakdown, a deliberate obscuring of the truth. We see how banks, under the guise of client confidentiality, actively resisted scrutiny, creating a fertile ground for financial malfeasance. This wasn't an accident. It was a calculated decision to prioritize profit and powerful connections over ethical responsibility. And this deliberate turning of a blind eye paved the way for other institutions, like Deutsche Bank, to become entangled in Epstein's web. Following the compliance bypass, Deutsche Bank's role in this sordid affair becomes starkly clear. They inherited Epstein as a client after JP Morgan finally, and belatedly, cut ties. But instead of exercising due diligence, Deutsche Bank, as the Wyden report meticulously details, replicated many of JP Morgan's failures. They ignored red flags, dismissed internal warnings, and continued to facilitate Epstein's financial activities, even as his criminal past was widely known. The emails unearthed in the investigation are damning, showing a bank more concerned with retaining a high-net-worth client than with upholding its legal and ethical obligations. This wasn't an isolated incident, it was a pattern of behavior that allowed a known predator to continue exploiting the financial system. And this brings us to a critical question: what is the ultimate verdict on these banks, and their collective failure to act responsibly? The evidence we've presented, from the executive contacts to the compliance bypasses and Deutsche Bank's complicity, leads to an undeniable verdict on these financial institutions. They were not merely passive observers, they were active enablers. The Wyden report unequivocally states that these banks, particularly JP Morgan and Deutsche Bank, prioritized profit over people and power over principle. Their internal controls were either non-existent or deliberately ignored, creating an environment where a known sex offender could operate with impunity. This isn't just about negligence, it's about a profound moral failure at the highest levels of the financial industry. And this systemic failure allowed Epstein to maintain his lavish lifestyle and, by extension, continue his horrific crimes. But the story doesn't end with the banks, it extends into the shadowy world of shell companies, which further obscured Epstein's illicit activities. The verdict on the banks is clear: they enabled Epstein. But the full scope of his financial machinations extends into an even more opaque realm, the shell company labyrinth. This complex web of offshore entities and anonymous corporations was not just a convenience for Epstein, it was a deliberate strategy to hide his assets, obscure his transactions, and evade scrutiny. The Wyden report exposes how these shell companies, often registered in secrecy havens, allowed Epstein to move vast sums of money without leaving a traceable footprint. This isn't just about tax evasion, it's about creating a financial shield behind which criminal activity can flourish. And it's this intricate network of shell companies that allowed Epstein to maintain his power and influence, even as his crimes were being exposed. This labyrinth of deceit is a critical piece of the puzzle, and understanding it is essential to fully grasping the scale of his operations. We've seen the labyrinth of shell companies, but now we must confront the deliberate obfuscation that followed. The forensic report, a document meant to bring clarity, instead became another layer of deception. This report, riddled with redactions and omissions, was designed to mislead investigators and protect the powerful. We know the Department of Justice failed to properly redact crucial information, leaving tantalizing clues about the true perpetrators. And we also know that the report itself was a carefully constructed narrative, deflecting blame and obscuring the real financial flows. This wasn't an accident, it was a calculated move to bury the truth. And this deliberate deception leads us directly to the concept of jurisdictional arbitrage. Jurisdictional arbitrage is the cynical exploitation of legal loopholes across different territories, and it's a cornerstone of this criminal enterprise. They don't just break laws, they manipulate entire legal systems to their advantage. This strategy allows them to move assets and operations across borders, always seeking the weakest regulatory environments. It's a shell game on a global scale, making it nearly impossible for any single jurisdiction to get a complete picture. And this brings us to a prime example of such a haven, the U.S. Virgin Islands. The U.S. Virgin Islands, a supposed American territory, has been transformed into a full-blown tax haven, a sanctuary for illicit wealth. This isn't just about lower taxes, it's about secrecy, a lack of oversight, and a willingness to look the other way. The Wyden report laid bare the shocking extent of this complicity, detailing how the USVI actively facilitates tax evasion and money laundering. It's a betrayal of American principles, allowing the wealthy to hide their fortunes while ordinary citizens bear the burden. And at the heart of this USVI operation, we find a key player, Southern Trust Company. Southern Trust Company isn't just another financial institution, it's a central pillar in this elaborate scheme, a linchpin for illicit activities. This entity, operating with impunity in the USVI, acts as a conduit for vast sums of money, enabling the powerful to shield their assets. We've uncovered disturbing emails, like the one where an executive explicitly states, "We don't want to be seen as a tax haven." This isn't just a slip of the tongue, it's a clear admission of their awareness and their intent to deceive. Southern Trust Company is a facilitator, a willing participant in this grand deception. And their primary tool for this is the asset isolation strategy. The asset isolation strategy is a sophisticated method designed to completely separate assets from their true owners, making them virtually untraceable. This isn't just about hiding money, it's about creating an impenetrable wall between illicit gains and accountability. They use complex legal structures, trusts, and shell corporations to ensure that even if one layer is exposed, the true beneficial owner remains hidden. It's a deliberate attempt to evade justice, to create a financial fortress that law enforcement struggles to breach. This strategy is a crucial step in the larger process of money laundering. This is how they did it. This is the blueprint for their financial crimes, a three-phase process of money laundering designed to obscure the origins of their ill-gotten gains. First, placement, the initial entry of dirty money into the financial system, often in small, seemingly legitimate transactions to avoid detection. Then, layering, a complex web of transactions, shell corporations, and offshore accounts, all meticulously crafted to distance the money from its criminal source. And finally, integration. The laundered funds are returned to the criminals as legitimate assets, ready to be spent without suspicion. This isn't some theoretical exercise, this is the very mechanism they employed, a sophisticated system that allowed them to operate with impunity for far too long. This intricate dance of deception is critical to understanding how they moved from isolating assets to actively cleaning their illicit wealth. And one of their most insidious tools in this layering phase was the so-called loan strategy. This wasn't about legitimate borrowing, it was a cynical manipulation of financial instruments to create a veneer of legality. They would use shell companies, often controlled by themselves, to issue loans to other shell companies, or even directly to themselves. These loans were rarely repaid in any conventional sense. Instead, they served as a convenient way to move money around, disguising its true origin and purpose. The Wyden report lays bare how these fabricated loans were instrumental in obscuring the flow of funds, making it nearly impossible for investigators to trace the money back to its criminal source. This loan strategy was a crucial cog in their misappropriation machine, a deceptive tactic that allowed them to funnel stolen assets with alarming ease. This brings us to the very heart of their operation, the misappropriation loop. This wasn't a one-off theft, it was a continuous, self-sustaining cycle of illicit enrichment. They would misappropriate funds, often through fraudulent means, then use the loan strategy and other layering techniques to launder the money. Once laundered, these funds would be reintegrated into their legitimate-looking businesses or personal accounts, ready to be used for further illicit activities or to fund their lavish lifestyles. The emails and documents we've uncovered reveal a chilling pattern, a constant churn of money moving through this loop, each cycle further entrenching their criminal enterprise. This wasn't just about stealing, it was about building an empire on stolen wealth, a fortress of fraud that seemed impenetrable. And who were the masterminds behind this elaborate scheme? We're talking about the architects, individuals like Indike and Khan, who meticulously designed and executed this financial labyrinth. These weren't petty criminals, these were sophisticated operators, leveraging their knowledge of finance and law to construct a system that defied easy detection. The evidence, including those damning emails, paints a clear picture of their central roles, their direct involvement in orchestrating the shell companies, the fraudulent loans, and the entire misappropriation loop. They were the engineers of this deception, the ones who pulled the strings, ensuring the money flowed precisely where they wanted it to go, all while maintaining a facade of legitimacy. Their actions weren't accidental, they were deliberate, calculated, and deeply criminal. But their criminality wasn't just about financial manipulation, it was also about building a legal fortress around themselves, a shield of lawyers and legal maneuvers designed to thwart any investigation. They understood that the best defense was a strong offense, and they used every legal loophole, every procedural delay, to their advantage. The redacted DOJ documents, those infuriating black boxes, hint at the extent of this legal protection, suggesting a concerted effort to obstruct justice and bury the truth. This wasn't just about avoiding prosecution, it was about creating an environment where they believed they were untouchable, where their wealth and influence could insulate them from accountability. This legal fortress, however, is now crumbling, and the truth is finally emerging. The Department of Justice, the very institution sworn to uphold the law, became an accomplice in this cover-up. They released a heavily redacted version of the Wyden report, a document meant to expose the truth, but instead, it obscured it. This wasn't an oversight, it was a deliberate act to protect the powerful and keep the public in the dark. The redactions were so extensive, so egregious, that they rendered the report almost meaningless, a ghost of its true self. They knew what they were doing, and they did it anyway, prioritizing secrecy over accountability. This act of suppression set the stage for further deception, making it clear that the fight for transparency would be an uphill battle. And here's where their facade truly crumbled, the redaction failure. This wasn't just a mistake, it was a catastrophic breach of trust that laid bare the DOJ's complicity. The Wyden report, supposedly scrubbed clean, inadvertently revealed the names of victims and the chilling details of their abuse. This wasn't a technical glitch, it was a profound failure of due diligence, a testament to their carelessness and their contempt for the very people they were supposed to protect. The implications are staggering. If they can't even redact a document properly, what else are they hiding? This blunder exposed the depth of their deception and the sheer incompetence that permeated their efforts to control the narrative. It was a moment of truth, however accidental, that ripped through their carefully constructed wall of silence. The fallout from this redaction failure was immediate and devastating, inflicting further trauma on those who had already suffered so much. Victims, whose identities were meant to be protected, found themselves re-victimized, their private pain thrust into the public eye. This wasn't just an abstract legal error, it was a deeply personal betrayal, shattering any remaining trust they might have had in the system. The emotional toll is immeasurable, a stark reminder that behind every redacted document are real lives, real people, whose stories deserve respect and protection. This callous disregard for their well-being is a stain on the integrity of our justice system, a wound that will not easily heal. It underscores the urgent need for accountability, not just for the initial crimes, but for the systemic failures that perpetuate the suffering. This pattern of systemic failure extends far beyond individual incidents, revealing a disturbing context within the very institutions designed to protect us. The Wyden report, even in its redacted form, hinted at a broader network of complicity, a lineup of individuals and agencies who either actively participated in the cover-up or stood idly by. We're not talking about isolated bad actors, we're talking about a culture of silence and protection that permeated the highest levels of power. This isn't just about one case, it's about a pervasive problem that allows abuse to flourish and justice to be denied. The evidence points to a deliberate effort to shield those in power, sacrificing the innocent for the sake of institutional reputation. This systemic rot demands a complete overhaul, not just superficial reforms. What we've witnessed throughout this entire ordeal is nothing short of transparency theater, a carefully orchestrated performance designed to give the illusion of openness while actively concealing the truth. The DOJ's release of the Wyden report, riddled with redactions, was a prime example of this cynical charade. They offered a glimpse, a mere sliver of information, just enough to placate public outcry but not enough to truly expose the depths of the conspiracy. This isn't genuine accountability, it's a calculated manipulation of public perception, a desperate attempt to control the narrative and avoid true scrutiny. They want us to believe they're acting in good faith, but their actions tell a very different story. This charade must end, and we must demand real transparency, not just a performance. We've seen the illusion of transparency, but what does real transparency look like? It's about revealing the truth, not just what's convenient. The Wyden report lays bare the DOJ's deliberate obfuscation, their refusal to acknowledge the systemic failures that allowed this travesty to unfold. They redacted crucial information, not for national security, but to protect their own. This isn't about protecting sources, it's about protecting reputations. We need to demand full disclosure, not just carefully curated narratives. This isn't just about what they tell us, it's about what they hide. And what they're hiding is far more damning than what they've revealed. This leads us directly to the question of who truly holds the power in this equation. So, who truly holds the power when the Department of Justice can simply redact away inconvenient truths? This isn't about oversight, it's about unchecked authority, a system where accountability is a suggestion, not a mandate. The DOJ's ability to control the narrative, to selectively release information, gives them immense leverage. They dictate what the public sees, what the public knows, and what the public can question. This power dynamic creates an environment ripe for abuse, where the very institutions meant to uphold justice can become its greatest impediment. We must understand this leverage to dismantle it. This unchecked power has profound implications for how we view intelligence itself. This brings us to a critical question. What kind of intelligence are we truly dealing with when the information is so heavily controlled and manipulated? It's not about gathering facts, it's about shaping perception. The DOJ's actions suggest a deliberate strategy to manage public understanding, to steer it away from uncomfortable truths. When intelligence is filtered through a lens of self-preservation, it ceases to be intelligence and becomes propaganda. We must ask ourselves, are we being informed, or are we being managed? This manipulation extends beyond just information, It impacts the very control of assets and estates. And this control over information directly translates into control over estates, over assets, over the very lives of those caught in this web. The DOJ's actions, their redactions, their deliberate withholding of evidence, directly impact the ability of victims to seek justice, to reclaim what is rightfully theirs. When the truth is obscured, when the facts are hidden, the powerful can continue to exploit and control. This isn't just about legal battles, it's about the systemic disenfranchisement of those who dare to challenge the establishment. The implications of this control leave us with many unanswered questions. Despite the Wyden report, despite the damning emails, we are still left with a litany of unanswered questions. Who truly authorized these redactions? What other information remains hidden? What is the full extent of the cover-up? The DOJ's stonewalling only deepens the suspicion, fueling the belief that there is far more to this story than they are willing to admit. We cannot allow these questions to fade into the background. We must demand answers, not just for the victims, but for the integrity of our justice system itself. The fight for truth is far from over. We've laid bare the unanswered questions, the deliberate obfuscation, and the profound lack of accountability. Now, it's time to demand action. This isn't merely about righting past wrongs, it's about preventing future betrayals of public trust. We must insist on a full, independent investigation into the DOJ's handling of these critical cases. The Wyden report provides a damning roadmap, but it's only a starting point. We need to see real consequences for those who allowed these redaction failures to occur, and for those who actively concealed the truth. This means a complete overhaul of the classification and declassification processes, ensuring transparency and accountability at every level. The public deserves to know the full extent of government misconduct, and we must not rest until that truth is revealed. This call to action is not a suggestion, it is an imperative. And it leads us directly into the insidious web of complicity that allowed this to fester. This isn't just about a few bad actors, it's a sprawling web of complicity, a systemic failure that implicates multiple agencies and individuals. The emails we've uncovered, the deliberate redactions, and the stonewalling tactics all point to a coordinated effort to suppress information. We see a pattern of behavior where convenience and political expediency trumped national security and public interest. The Wyden report details how the DOJ actively resisted oversight, creating an environment where such failures could thrive unchecked. This wasn't an accident, it was a consequence of a culture that prioritized secrecy over transparency. And this culture of secrecy, this web of complicity, ultimately led to a profound systemic failure. The evidence overwhelmingly points to a systemic failure, not isolated incidents. This isn't about individual mistakes, it's about a broken system that allowed critical information to be withheld, that enabled a culture of impunity. The DOJ's repeated redaction failures, as detailed in the Wyden report, are not anomalies. They are symptoms of a deeper malaise, a fundamental flaw in how our government handles sensitive information. We've seen how the very mechanisms designed to protect us were instead used to obscure the truth. This systemic breakdown has eroded public trust and compromised the integrity of our institutions. It's a failure that demands a complete reevaluation of how power is exercised and how accountability is enforced. And this systemic failure brings us to a stark conclusion. We've reached a chilling conclusion. The government has actively worked to conceal critical information from the American people. The evidence, from the Wyden report to the specific emails we've highlighted, paints a picture of deliberate obfuscation and a profound disregard for transparency. This isn't just about national security, it's about the very foundation of our democracy. When the government can operate in such secrecy, without accountability, the public loses its ability to make informed decisions. We've seen how this lack of transparency has allowed misconduct to fester and trust to erode. The implications are dire, and the need for reform is urgent. We must demand a government that serves its people, not one that hides from them. And this urgent demand for transparency leads us to our final thoughts. The time for silence is over. We've presented the facts, the evidence, and the undeniable truth of government overreach and deliberate concealment. This isn't just a story, it's a call to arms for every citizen who believes in transparency and accountability. We must hold our institutions to a higher standard, demanding that they operate with integrity and openness. The fight for truth is ongoing, and it requires our collective vigilance. Let this serve as a stark reminder: the power of the people lies in their ability to demand answers and to hold the powerful accountable. We must never stop asking the hard questions, and we must never stop fighting for the truth. The future of our democracy depends on it.